you now have the four largest companies by market value in the United States, a $30 trillion market. You have four companies that essentially don't need any net tangible assets. And if you go back many years, if you looked at the largest companies, Carol used to put out the Fortune 500 list, and it would be AT&T or General Motors, and it was companies that ExxonMobil. It was companies that just required lots of capital in order to produce earnings. So American industry has gotten incredibly more profitable in aggregate in the last 20 or 30 years. You look at the return on the S&P 500, the earnings as a percent of net tangible assets, and the rest is just, if you buy a company that has $1 million worth of net worth and you pay $1 billion for it, it still only had the $1 million of net worth. You just paid more for it. So the basic profitability of the company is huge, even though your investment may be at a significantly higher price. And so that what has happened is that I think if you look at the earnings on tangible net worth of the S&P 500 and compare it to 20 years ago, it is amazing. And that is really due to the fact that this has become somewhat, you could call it an asset-light economy. And those four companies that earn 10% they comprise close to 10% of the market value of the entire publicly traded corporate America. They don't take any money, basically, and that is a changing world, and they will earn even more money with the tax rate going down, and I don't think people have quite processed all that information in terms of what has gone on in the market. Carnegie built a steel mill and then he paid it off, or he borrowed a little money and then he built another steel mill and all of that sort of thing. But it was enormously capital intensive. And one industry after another, AT&T was enormously capital intensive. And now the money is in the asset light. Huge money is in the not only asset light business, but the negative asset. IBM it has no tangible, there's a net minus tangible net worth. There's nothing wrong with that. It's terrific. But it is not the world we lived in 30 years ago. And in that sense, I didn't see that coming in 1999 when I wrote whatever I wrote there. It hasn't changed the profitability of the asset-heavy companies particularly. It isn't like oil. If you take the 5 most capital-intensive industries in the 90s, I don't think you'll find that their earnings on tangible assets have increased a lot. But you will find that this group has moved in that really doesn't. They don't need any net tangible assets at all, or they need very minor amounts.
I'm wondering about your interest in not just Apple, but all of the tech stocks like Amazon and Google, because you've avoided them, you've stated in the past, because they're complicated, you should stick with something you understand. On the other hand, Amazon and Google have what you call a very durable competitive advantage. They really hardly have any competitor. And that's true in China, too, of Alibaba and Tencent. So it seems like it's a conflict, and I'm wondering if you're going to be turning the corner and going into these tech companies that seem to have no serious competition.
Well, we certainly look at them, and we don't think of whether we should be in tech companies or not, or that sort of thing. We are looking for things where we do get into the durability of the competitive advantage, and whether we think that our opinion might be better than other people's opinion in assessing the probability of the durability, so to speak. But the truth is that I've watched Amazon from the start, and I think what Jeff Bezos has done is something close to a miracle. And the problem is, if I think something will be a miracle, I tend not to bet on it. It would have been better, far better, obviously, if I'd had some insights into certain businesses. But in fact, Bill Gates told me early on, that I think I was on AltaVista, and he suggested I turn to Google. But the trouble is, I saw that Google was skipping past AltaVista, and then I wondered if anybody could skip past Google. And I saw at Geico that we were paying a lot of money for something that cost them nothing incrementally. So we've looked at it, and I made a mistake in not being able to come to a conclusion where I really felt that at the present prices that the prospects were far better than the prices indicated. And I didn't go into Apple because it was a tech stock in the least. I went into Apple because I came to certain conclusions about both the intelligence with the capital would be employed, but more important, about the value of an ecosystem and how permanent that ecosystem could be and what the threats were to it and a whole bunch of things. And I don't think that required me to take apart an iPhone or something and figure out what all the components were or anything. It's much more the nature of consumer behavior. And some things strike me as having a lot more permanence than others. But the answer is, I'll miss a lot of things that I don't feel I understand well enough. And there is no penalty in investing if you don't swing a ball that's in the strike zone, as long as you swing at something at some point, and eventually that you find the pitches you like. And that's the way we'll continue to do it. We'll try to stay within our circle of competence. And Charlie and I generally agree on sort of where that circle ends, and what kind of situations where we might have some kind of an edge in our reasoning or our experience or something, that where we might evaluate something differently than other people. But the answer is we're going to miss a lot of things. Charlie?
Yeah, we have a wonderful system. If one of us is stupid in some area, so is the other. And of course, we were not ideally located to be high-tech wizards. How many people of our age quickly mastered Google? I've been to Google headquarters. They look to me like it looks like a kindergarten.
A very rich kindergarten.
Yes.
No, it's extremely impressive what they've done. And like I say, at Geico, we were paying them a lot of money at the time they went public, and all three of them, the main characters, Eric and Larry and Sergey, they actually came and saw me, but they were more than talking about going public and the mechanics of it and various things along that line. But it wasn't like what they were doing was a mystery to me. The mystery was how much competition would come along and how effective they would be, and whether it would be a game where 4 or 5 people were slugging it out without making as much money as they could if one company dominated. Those are tough decisions to make. You can have industries where there's only 2 people in it, and they still aren't very, very good because they beat each other's brains out. And that's one of the questions in the airline business. It's a better business now than it used to be, but it used to be suicide. So, and that the competitive factors are extraordinary in airlines. And how much better business is it with 4 people operating at 85% capacity than it was with 7 or 8 operating in the mid-70s and with more planes around? those are tough decisions. But I made the wrong decision on Google and Amazon. I really consider that a miracle that you could be doing Amazon Web Services and changing retail at the same time without enormous amounts of capital, and do it with the speed and effectiveness of what Amazon has done. I underestimated. I had a very, very, very high opinion of Jeff's ability when I first met him, and I underestimated him. Charlie?
Well, my comment would be that the shareholders have one thing to be thankful for. Some of the age-related stupidity at headquarters has been ameliorated by Ted and Todd joining us. We are looking at the world with the aid of some younger eyes now, and they've had a contribution
Significant.
beyond their own investments. And so you're very lucky to have them, you shareholders, because there's a lot of ignorance in the older generation that needs removal.
Warren, you are a big believer in the U.S. political system, the financial system, and in every American. You've said that regardless of who is president, the economy and the U.S. consumer will continue to prosper over the long run. All that said, do you believe that people in this country are more divided today than 50 years ago, or is it just social media and media in general that blows this divide out of proportion? And if you do believe the divide has grown, what words of wisdom do you have to possibly help remedy it?
Now, I would say this: multiple times in my life, people have felt the country was more divided than ever, and I've gone through periods where people I knew and admired thought that because the other party was in power, that there never would be another election, that the Constitution would. I've heard everything. Now, the interesting thing is, this paper from 1942, since then, there have been 14 American presidents. Just since my young venture into the stock market at 11, I've lived under 14 of the 44 presidents the United States has had. Now, they call Trump 45, but they count Grover Cleveland twice. So there's really only been 44 presidents of the United States. And 14 of the 44 have been during this period when that $10,000 became 51 million. 7 have been Republicans, 7 have been Democrats. 1 has been assassinated, 1 has resigned under pressure. It works. If you'd told me at the start, that you'd have a Cuban Missile Crisis, and you'd have nuclear weapons, and you'd have a panic in 2000, financial panic, and you'd have many recessions, and you'd have war in the streets in the late 60s from a divided country, you'd say, why the hell are you buying stocks? And through it all, America, in fits and starts, but America really moves ahead. And we survived the Civil War. I mean, hate to think of having to do it that way, but this country, in only less than 3 of my lifetimes, if you go back 3 of my lifetimes, you go back 263 years, I guess, and Thomas Jefferson is 12 years old, and that's just 3, and there was nothing here. You've flown in from all over to Omaha today, and you flew over a country with more than 75 million owner-occupied homes and 260 million vehicles and great universities and medical systems and everything. And it's all a net gain in less than 3 of my lifetime. So, and we've had these events since I started buying my first stock. This country really, really works, and it always will have lots of disagreements, and after every election you'll have people feeling the world is coming to an end, and how could this happen? And I remember my future father-in-law in 1952, he wanted to have a talk with me before his daughter and I got married. So kind of reluctantly, I sat down with him and he said, Warren, he said, there's just one thing I want to tell you. He said, you're going to fail. He said, the Democrats are going to get in, they're going to take over the country, and you're going to fail, but don't feel responsible for it because it's not your fault. I mean, he wanted to absolve me from this feeling that when his daughter was starving to death, it was my fault. And I kept buying stocks and doing a little bit better all the time. And if the Republicans were in, it was okay, and it was because of them that I was doing well. And if they were out, forget it, it was all going to disappear. So I've seen a lot of American public opinion over the years. I've seen a lot of media commentary. I've seen the headlines. And when you get all through with it, this country has 6 times the per capita GDP growth, the GDP per capita that it had when I was born. One person's lifetime, 6-for-1 change. Everybody in this room essentially is living better in multiple ways than John D. Rockefeller Sr. was, who was the richest person in the world during my early years. And we're all living better than he could live. So this is a remarkable, remarkable country, and we found something very special. I would love to be a baby being born in the United States today. Charlie, you give the other side of this.
Well, there's a tendency to think that our present politicians are much worse than any we had in the past. But we tend to forget how awful our politicians were in the past. I can remember a prominent senator arguing with an absolute earnestness that mediocre people ought to have more representation on the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, he came from Nebraska, incidentally.
He came from Nebraska. So we're not quite as bad as that yet.